Hello, Embird users. This is Lisa WeQuilt with WeQuilt Studio, and this is a tutorial about making a background mesh for a stitch file that you've either bought or got for free or what have you. And you want to edit this stitch file in Studio Next. So instead of right-clicking Edit Stitch File in Studio, in regular Studio, you want to edit it in Studio Next. Because regular Studio doesn't have the mesh. It doesn't have mesh of any kind, but Studio Next does. So what do you do? Well, you want to create your echo around the design. So you would click on the design and you would go to Insert, Effect, Contour, and I found that about 3 millimeters in Editor will give you 3 millimeters on each edge. It's pretty good. That's about 1/8 of an inch for an echo, and quilters, if they're going to echo, they like to echo between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch. So we're just going to use 3 mils, like 1/8 of an inch, and we're going to ignore the cavity. So we're going to ignore everything inside of this design and hit OK. And I've decided that I'll just use a stitch length of 2.0 because I don't want to go too small because then it really gets jagged, and I don't want to go too large either. So 2.0 is good. 2.2 is what long armors use, most of them, 11 stitches per inch. The 2.0 is closer to 12 stitches per inch, so that's fine, and that's the default. 1 layer is what you want for contours. And of course you want a single stitch, so you don't want any of these decorative stitches. You just want the single stitch, and you'll hit OK. And there's your contour. Now, of course, you don't want these two, and you can click on it and you can delete them here, or you can delete them once you get to Studio Next. And you'll notice on this contour, if I zoom in, it is a little jagged a little bit in some places, and that's because we're generating this contour from a stitch file. So it's not going to be a perfect vector edge. Now this one's not bad because my outline, which obviously is the last object of my design, this green outline, so it's kind of following that. So it's really didn't do a bad job. But sometimes if your outline is just like a stitch, a fill stitch that's jagged, then your edges are going to be jagged. And you could see the stitches are not consistent in places. And, you know, here. So that's why you really need Studio, which is called Digitizing Tools. And that's an add-on. It's about $150. And remember, you can get a 10% off coupon if you go to WeQuiltStudio.com and click on the bird, and there'll be a coupon code for you to use in Embird's eShop, and all the links will be down in the description. So this is why I never stick with just the contour from Editor, because Editor is the stitch program. And yes, you can make a mesh in Embird Editor, but you're always going to get better stitches if you use Studio Next. So, and I think I've shown some comparisons of the two in some of my other videos and some of my Facebook posts and whatnot. So just trust me, it's better to work in a vector program. But the stitch program, and I'm just going to hit view selected. The stitch program does allow you a quick way to get your contour. So we have the, not the contour, but I would call this the echoed contour, echo for short. So, and then we also want a contour of the design itself, because we're going to use the two contours to edit the echo. We need something to base it on once we get into Studio Next. So we're going to click our design again and do the same thing. Insert, Effect, Contour, but this time we're not going to inflate it at all because we want the contour of the actual design. So we'll hit 0, ignore cavity, okay, same thing, okay. And then that one is right here. It comes right up above what you had selected. So this one, we're going to just turn it a different color. We'll just make it black. And so that one's black, and then this one will be blue. However, when we take them into Studio Next, they're both going to be black because they're going to be imported as SVGs. So how do we import these as SVGs? Well, you just right click on the color block, so not on the object but on the color block. You right click, save cutting file, and you can save them as these different formats, and you'll want the SVG when you get there. Do you want to close them? Yes. So if they were open, you want Embird to close them. And we don't want to inflate any of these because we've already got them the size we want. We'll hit OK. They ask us where to save it. And I'm going to call this one just the contour. So this is just the contour of the design. So this is the contour, and it's an SVG, not any of these. This is for Brother. I think this is for people who etch into wood and so on. I believe that's what this is for. So we just want the SVG, and we'll hit save. And then we'll do the same thing now to the blue one, the actual echo. So we'll right click, save cutting file, yes, okay. And then this one we'll call echo, new. Don't need all of that. I actually don't even need that because it's saved as an SVG, but either way. And you'll hit save. And so now we don't have to worry about, right clicking, edit stitch file in Studio, because we've already got our SVGs. And remember, when you click edit stitch file in Studio, in order to use that file as a vector outline file, you have to do convert manual to connection and then convert connection to outline, and then you can edit it as a vector object instead of just manual stitches. But when you do it this way, save cutting file as an SVG, it's already converted to a vector object when you import it into Studio. And just so you know, you could do this with Studio regular as well. So if you didn't want to do edit stitch file in Studio and go through all those other steps, you could just do what we did now and import your SVG in regular Studio. This is just another way of doing it. So at any rate, we have our SVGs. So now we're going to go into Studio Next. to do our mesh and to edit this outline so it's better. And so the stitches are more consistent. We'll do Insert, Studio Next. Here we are in Studio Next, and we're going to import those two SVGs. Design, Export, Import vector file. And let's see, mine is in, so your folders are all up here. So I'll click Stitch and Vector. Mesh is the folder I had it in, and you only have to click once. And I believe it was in Stitch File Mesh. And these are my two files. They're only the SVGs are going to show because we did import vector file. So the first one I'll bring in is just the contour, and there it is, and it looks pretty good. So you'll see when I click open and I hit Control-1 to zoom to it, it's not bad. It's not bad, and that's just the contour, so we don't have to worry about editing this, you know. And the reason why this looks so good is because, like I said, my last object was the outline in editor, was that light green outline. So this picked that up fairly well. So now we're going to import the echo. Design, Export, Import vector file. Echo, there it is. Click open, and there's our echo. And here's these two little objects we don't need. So I'll hit Control just to deselect that first one and then hit delete. So like I said, they both come in black because they were imported, you know, SVGs, so they always come in black. And so we'll click on the echo, and we'll make it, I believe, if you click on Embird Editor in your taskbar while you're in Studio, I know it used to be that then when you do compile and put into Editor, it doesn't come up. You have to do it again. So just bear that in mind. I'm going to check my color here. So I'm clicking on Editor down in the taskbar. Okay, so I was blue. So let's go back to Studio Next. So I'm just going to click more, and I'll just make that blue, just so they both agree, so I don't get confused. So, and as we look at this vector object, if I just grab the magnifier and, you know, go down to say this corner, you can see that, you know, it did come in jagged because it was mimicking a stitch file. You know, even though it's an SVG, it was basing its shape on a stitch file. So we definitely have to edit that if we want this to be a beautiful contour. Because remember, I mean, we could be making this as a patch, or we can be making it as a, you know, having a mesh in the background. Either way, we want this to be perfect. So now, before you start your editing, you do want to make sure that your vector object came in at the exact same size that it was in Editor. So I have the blue selected, which is the echo, and I'll look down at the bottom. It's 106.8 mils by 88 mils. So 106.8, and I'm going to go to Editor, and my blue one is selected. And if I look at the bottom, it's 106.8 by 88 as well. So that's good. So we'll go back and we'll start our editing now. So what I would do for this design, I'd first try to see if I could only do half of it and then just mirror it, you know, to save myself some time. So this here, I already know I want to edit. So I'm just going to click on Edit or Control E, the blue selected. And you see all the nodes that come in. You know, that's what happens when you import a vector object. There's a lot of nodes. They're real close together. And there's no curved nodes usually. So one thing I did forget though, let me just hit Enter or Escape. I'm going to be snapping to this blue object, but you can't snap to the same object you're working on. So you'll make a copy of this blue, copy and paste. So Control C, Control V. The one I'm going to snap to, I'll just make yellow. So I'll just click this one more and I'll make it yellow, just so I know I'm going to delete it later. Click on the blue and now I'll hit Edit. And I don't really need all of these, so I can just click on this one down at the bottom because I think I am going to make this pointed down here just to make it easier. And since the arrow is pointing to the left, I can go to the very next node, and the very next node, you know, is right there. But when you're zoomed out, of course, it's hard to see it. So you could just hold Control and hit N. That takes you to the next node. And now I can just use my delete key and delete everything all the way up to this node. Or I can use this new tool that they've activated here in the edit mode, which is just your select tool. So I'll click it and I'll just click outside and it starts to draw a box. And you know, you can move it there. I can click here. And so now all of these are in the box. Then you hit select. They're all selected. And then you just hit delete. But nothing is selected now. So you want to click the node that you want to click the node where you get the arrow pointing at that node. That's how you make this have a curved node. So you click on this one and you click the curve icon up here. Okay, and now you got a curved node. Now this node here got deleted, you know, because for some reason when I selected them, it deleted that one. I'm not sure. I didn't have it in the box, but no worries because we have a copy of this object, that yellow copy. We can snap to this node now. Just make sure Snap to Nodes is selected here. And we'll just take this and snap it. And then we can leave Snap to Nodes on, and we could just snap to one of these nodes here that are, you know, kind of in the center. And we can snap to that. So we can leave it like that. It's not as wide down here. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll move this one out just to make this follow. Now slide that up. Now it follows better. And so I'm going to have to do this side as well. So now I'll do it the other way by just deleting. So the arrow's pointing this way. So if I hit delete now, you know, I'm going to delete this one and then every other one that way. So I'll come over here and click this. Actually, not that one. I'll click this one and I'll just hold down my delete a few times. And then I'll click, click, click. And then this one's selected. The arrow's pointing at it. So I'll hit curve. And then I'll snap this one and see how I line up. So I might slide this there. That looks pretty good. So, and then I can try and get this right in the center, but instead of messing with that, I think what I'll do is I'll click on this one, and then the one next to it is the one I want to start deleting. So I'm going to just hit Control and then N to get to that node, and then I'm just going to hit delete, 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 round node, and I'm going to snap down. And now it's kind of snapping to the nodes, so I'm going to uncheck that and just snap to object edges so I can slide this along. So I can see up at the top here that my cursor is on 0 right about there. That's pretty good. I mean, you don't have to be exact, but what I've noticed is this one is lower than this one. I'll bring down a guide. Okay. All right. And so now, if you're worried that you're going to select the guide instead of this blue node, wait for your cursor to be a plus sign like that. If it's a white plus sign, that selects the guide because I don't have lock guidelines on. So there, and so I'll select it, and I'll have snap to guide selected over here, and I'll snap that to the guide. So that looks pretty good. Whoops, I selected the guide by accident. And I could zoom in more up here, or I can use this box, this magnifier here, and draw a box to zoom in. So, and you can also look at the cursor if you want, if this is a symmetric design. So I'm probably need to be on the 4 up here because this one looks like it's a little bit, you know, before the 4. So, but it just, my design doesn't look that perfect. So we'll go with that. I'll zoom out. And I'll finish it up. Now, if you're worried that these aren't going to be like saved or what have you, you can just hit enter now. Hit Control S because we haven't named this yet. So let's see. I was in quilting. Okay, so I have to go up farther. So I hit quilting. I have to hit WeQuilt. Embroidery designs. I'm only clicking once. All stitch and vector, mesh, stitch file, mesh. Okay. Whoops, I went up. There's nothing in it yet because I haven't saved anything yet. We'll just call it mesh, but tribal. Okay, and I'll click save. Okay, so at least now what we've done is saved. So I'm going to scroll up and I'm going to do this section here. So I'll hit edit, and again, it's such a gentle curve that I probably only need a node here and a node down here. So I will just grab the box. Actually, let me decide which node I want. I'll just decide that that'll be my node that I want, and I'll draw my box. I can always delete them manually, but sometimes this is easier. Click out here, select, delete. Okay, I'm going to delete that one because it's kind of in my way. I'm going to click on this one and bring it a little bit like there. And the arrow's pointing at this node, make it curved. Let's see, I have snap to. Let me have snap to guide on. Let's just click snap to node again. Okay, so that's not really lining up with the original line, so that just means I have to click on this again and bring it out a little. Zoom out just a hair. Okay, I think that's about good. If I hit snap to object edge, I can slide around. That looks good enough for me. I'm happy with that. Maybe not. Maybe I'm such a perfectionist. Okay, that's pretty good. And so then from here to here, I want all of these gone. So let's see. I'll just click here this time and hold delete just for a few seconds. Let go. 1, 2. There. Curve. And that worked out well. And this one looks pretty good. I'm gonna maybe leave this one. Well, I don't know. I don't know. It is slightly jagged. I can get this to be perfect as well. So I'll just click here to curve. I'm snapping. I'm going to let that ride. And now I'm going to see if I can mirror this. So I'm going to click on this one. Let's see. So now to mirror this, I really want a start point here or a split object here, you know, at the halfway mark. Yes, I did need to do this with these two nodes just so that I can get an idea of where I wanted this curve node to be. And then one other thing I forgot, which I should have done when I actually worked on this area, is I forgot to bring in a vertical guide. So I want this vertical guide to line up with the 0 up here. And remember, I don't have my lock guidelines on. You can only lock your guides when you're not in edit mode. But it does look like my circle is right in the center. I can click snap to guide on down here, make sure it's on, and I can uncheck snap to node just so I don't have too many things checked. And I'll wait for the dark plus sign and it's snapped to the guide. So now I know it's perfectly in the center of the hoop. And now with it selected, I want to turn it into a square node. So you just hit add node up here and now it's square, and I can just right click anywhere because it's selected and click place. I'll just click place start point here because that's usually the first thing you do, because then you'll go all the way back up to the top and split it on the other one. So I've got the white plus, make sure it's the dark black plus, click, and then right click anywhere, split object. So now our left side is split from our right side. We don't need the right side anymore. Okay, it's selected over here, and I'll just hit delete, and then I'll click on the blue again, go back into edit. Now it's got the last node selected. Let me just zoom out. Should have zoomed out so you could see it. And the last node is selected, and so we'll hit edge, mirror, duplicate and mirror horizontally. And there you go. It created that, and it did work out quite well. Everything looks perfect. So I'll hit check or enter, and we don't need the yellow anymore. We'll hit Control S, and there's our outline. And I could do options, guides, erase guides, and now I can really see it very clearly. So now that we have our outline, our actual echo, that's perfect, and we saved it, we can go ahead now and create our mesh for the outside, or we can turn this into a patch. We can do so much, but it's perfect. Now remember, we're not saving this black contour. That was just to help us create our blue. We're just going to leave it there for now, and we'll go ahead and finish up with our mesh and then take it into editor. So now you would decide how big you want your mesh background to be. So that would be determined by the size of your hoop or the size of your quilt block. My largest design, or my largest hoop, is 240 mils wide by 200 tall. So if I had something square like this, or a square block, I can't go over the 200, obviously. So I'd like to keep it a little less than 200, so I have room for if I'm slightly off and I need to rotate slightly, one way or the other after I'm hooped. So instead of going all the way up to 200, I like to go to either 180 or 190 on my mesh object. For me, this will be for a quilt block. And if you think about it in that respect, if your quilt blocks are, say, 8 inches, then, from seam to seam, if your finished block, that's kind of a good number to base your quilt blocks on, because that is about 200 millimeters. And so if you kind of want your mesh to start a 1/4 of an inch in from there, or even a 1/2 inch in. So if you go 190 off of, say, an 8-inch block or a 200 millimeter block, that means you have 5 mils on each edge. Well, 5 mils is about a 1/4 of an inch. So I'll click on the fill, because you always have to start with a fill, because we're going to be creating holes, and you can't create holes with the mesh. So you click on the fill, and then you click once, and then shape, rectangle, and then just start anywhere and draw and drag a rectangle and just hit enter. And you can actually center it now if you want, but it's better to just, well, it's not better. It doesn't matter when you center it. If I hold Control and Alt and then hit C, that'll center it. Or I could have gone to Transform, Center, Bring to Center. But you do want to size it, so you'll go to Transform, Transformation Window, Size. You don't want to have aspect ratio checked, because you want to make this, click on it, and you want to make it 190. So click in here and then hit enter twice. Once brings the cursor out of this box, and again is like you're hitting the check mark. So you hit enter twice and then click here, same thing. I'll just backspace, whoops, 190, enter, enter. And then you have to hit apply. And if you do the centering from this window instead of just dragging the handle, it actually stays centered. The box stays centered. So I'll hit apply. And if I zoom out, you'll see there's my square. So after you hit apply, though, you're still in this tool. So, and remember, to see this transform window over here, you have to have this selected over here. I forgot to mention that. So if you had this selected, then you have a different tool on the right. So you want to have transform selected. But at any rate, after you hit apply, you're still in this tool. You either hit this button here to get out of it or hit escape. So now you have your fill, but you have to create this hole. So you click on the blue and it's an outline. So you go to convert, outline, create fill from outline. So now you have the fill. And this fill is right after this square block fill that we created, which is perfect because that's when you can make this into a hole that's going to be created on the object before it. So if it's not before it, say if I take this and drag it up, insert before, if it were like that, you couldn't make it a hole. Click, drag, insert after. So you do want it to be after, and you did want to go with the transform shaping difference, you'd hold control and have them both selected. Go to build shaping difference. So you have your yellow one with the hole, but you still have these two which you don't need. So that's why it's kind of best to just leave the blue one after the yellow and go to convert, fill, mesh, sfumato, fill to opening. So you're converting a fill to an opening. So this fill is going to be converted to an opening on the object before it. And there it is. And so now that it's a fill, you may, if you wanted decorative outlines around the inside and the outside, this is the time to make it. So you would go convert, fill mesh, create outlines. So now you have outlines. So let's make these like a different color. Okay. And then there's your fill. And this is now when you can convert your fill to a mesh. So convert, fill mesh, sfumato, fill to mesh. So now it's a mesh. And you can, again, you can make it a lighter color if you like. Let's just make it completely different color. Okay. And then now you can assign it parameters. So, and hit Control S every so often to save it. And so now we'll assign this parameters. So with it selected, we'll go into params. And you can see mesh is selected here. And we'll go to the one I like is tiles. And I do like number 35, which shows up as it by default. I also really like 1 and 2. I like 5. I like them all, to be honest. So I'll just select 2. And the scale, I usually want it to be about 300. So we can go, because I like my quilting to be loose. So I'm going to go 300. Either 200 or 300 is usually what I select on these larger blocks. And then you want to go to this first tab and set your stitch length. Since there's curves in this design, I'm going to use a 1.5 for my min and a 2.2 for my max. I'll just hit the 2, click backspace 2, enter, enter. This is about 11 stitches per inch, which is what a lot of long armors like to use. And so then that's it. You don't need the effect tab. You don't need any of these effects unless you want them. And you don't need the transformation tabs. We're not really rotating, so we don't need to change angles or anything. So then you hit apply. As opposed to generate stitches, apply will keep this window open in case you need to change your params, and generate stitches will generate the stitches and close this window, but I find it takes the program a lot longer. So I hit apply, then if I like it, I just hit done. There you go. And you can go into 3D. And now what I'm seeing is I still have my outlines showing. So if I wanted to hide the outlines so I could see the entire mesh, I would hold my cursor on the eyeball and hold it on this one. And you'd say, well, it's still, the blue is still showing. Well, that's because we're in 3D. If I were in normal mode, then the blue went away. But when you're in 3D, if you hide something, you have to generate these for them to really be hidden. So I hold Control and select them both, and then I'll just hit the generate down here. And they should go away then once you're generated. And what's showing now is this one up here still. And this one here, I actually don't need it anymore because I made I made an outline. So it actually made the inner and the outer, which I already had the inner, but so now I don't really need it. So I'll just hit delete and delete that. So now you can see that contours were actually made, and I'll zoom in. I'll just hold down my plus sign, and you'll see that contours were made, you know, all the way around the inside of this mesh and the outside. If you didn't want that, you could have selected, if I go into params, on this first tab, you could have unselected include contours. But when you do that, you get these little connection stitches inside, because I believe it needs the contours to make its travel stitches. And I'll just show you what I mean. If I hit apply now, and on some designs, those connection stitches aren't apparent, but here they are. See here and here. So if you didn't want them, for instance, if you didn't want a lot of density there because you were going to add a decorative outline afterwards, if I click done and I just select outside, you see they're gone, and then I can use a decorative stitch, and it'll just be a one layer. But for me, it doesn't really seem to affect it that much as far as the density map goes. So I usually stitch it with the contours, and if I want to add a decorative outline, I can. Now, usually with a quilt, you wouldn't add a decorative outline, but if this is a regular embroidery design, like on a purse or something, you may want to add a decorative outline. So I'm just going to go back to, and I could hit Control Z, but sometimes I've noticed the program, if you hit Control Z, it Control Z's back 2 times. And I believe they're going to be fixing that. It's just a bug in the software because remember, this is still in beta. So at any rate, I'm just going to go ahead and select Include Contours, click Apply, done. And then if I did want to put a decorative outline on, I'll just select these two and then go into params. But I'm going to use one of my custom ESMs, so they're not in params yet. I have to put them in params. So in Studio Next, it's under Gadgets, Fragment Editors, instead of User Editors. Like in regular Studio, it's called Fragment Editors. So you click that, and you click on the one, and the one is selected. So you have 5 boxes to fill in. And you click these 3 dots, Open Sample. And what's nice about Studio Next, it will go to the last file or the last folder you've had open, whether or not you close Embird altogether or not. And that's nice. You don't have to navigate to these anymore like you do in Studio Regular. So I'm just going to click the arrowhead and open, and there it is there. And I'm going to click it again. I'm going to click number 2. Now they don't show up here, so you have to remember that one is already filled in. So I'm going to click 2. They'll show up if you close this and reopen it, but when you first do it, they don't show up here. So I'll click 2 and I'll just put one more in, open sample. And maybe I'll just click on, I'll click on this one. It's like a thicker back stitch. It's kind of cute. And then I'll hit done. And now with these two selected, I'll go into params, click single stitch, and you see my two are right here. And I usually like the arrowhead. I've just been fond of that lately. I like it because it's similar to Embird's, but my arrowhead goes in on this wider part, whereas Embird's triangles, they don't go in. And I just feel like this creates just a really delicate outline. And my cell lengths are set. And remember, the cell length is like how long this arrow is. So I have my min and max set to the same. And this tab is the width of it. So this way, width-wise, it's 6 mils wide. And you can change those, you know, either way. And you can mirror sides if, say, your design is one-sided, like, let's see, these two are pretty much the same on both sides. The blanket stitch that Embird has, that's a one-sided design. So you can try it. Okay, so you may want this stitch to be going to the outside. So on, say, the butterfly, you may want them coming in, but say on this one, you may want it coming out. So in that case, you would leave it like this for now because we have them both selected. So you would just hit done. And then the one that you want to change, say this one, you would just select that one and then go back into params. Go back into this tab and then mirror that and hit apply, and there you go. And of course you could change your params, you know, the minimum cell length. So this here is the distance, you know, going from left to right. So the distance between these stitch points, these stitches, like from here to here. And then this is the width. So from here to here. So just so you know, but I'm going to go back to the arrowhead and just click apply. Just know you could change any of these params. Now, you don't see the rest of the arrowhead up here when it's selected, so you'll have to click done to see that, just to make sure you like it, and then click outside, and there you can see the rest of it. Oops, I didn't have them both selected, so I can just click on this one, and when I see the hand, I usually see the hand when I'm on this icon here, just slide down, set identical parameters. So you basically drag it, let go, and then this box appears, and then click set identical parameters. Now it's the arrow, and I could just generate, and then I'm back to the arrow. I'm probably not going to use a decorative stitch because this will be like a quilting in the hoop, but I did want to show you that in case you did want to use it. So for right now, I don't need them. The one thing that I may want to keep is the box, and I could turn this into a basting box for when I actually stitch out my butterfly design on just the quilt top, because remember, we're going to stitch the actual design, the whole interior, on the quilt top before we add any batting or backing or anything. And you may want to stitch a basting box for that. So we could do that here, or we could do it in editor. It's either way. If we did it in editor, it would be a basting box based on this, and it still should stitch as a perfect box that's not jagged, because remember, I've stitched the contours. So we can just do it in editor. If I want to stitch a basting box where the stitches are easy to come out, sometimes I like to generate the basting box in editor because it applies no tie-offs whatsoever unless you actually tell this program to add them. If I add a basting box now, I'd have to convert it to a manual because I have my manuals set to only have one tie on and tie off. But you're still having a tie on and a tie off. Some machines need that. They need something in order to catch, or else they don't catch. So it's up to you. If I leave it in Studio and create that small little tie off like I said, I'll keep this box, I'll delete this one, I'll click on the box, I will go back into params and whoops, and I'll just click single stitch, which is right here, and I'll set my cell lengths to like 4 or 5. Sometimes I like 4 better than 5, just on my machine. It seems to be not as loose, but you have to decide. So I'll click 4 for both, and then I'll hit done. But remember, my tie off is going to be activated. Let me go back into params and show you what I mean. This setting here for overall, if I click on it, it's the same shield that's in regular Studio. It's over here and it says overall. These 2 tabs I have set. These up here I don't, but these 2 I do. So this one is my tie-ups. So for fills, outlines, and columns, I have 6 tie-ups. So right now that outline is going to have 6 tie-ups. It's going to be hard to take that basting stitch out for when I do my quilting later. So I would want to turn it into a manual stitch. My manuals I have set for 1. I could set them for 0 if I wanted. And that way they'd be set. And then I don't have to save that 0. I could just apply it for this particular outline that I'm going to turn into a manual stitch. Or I could save it for future. And to do that, I go up to here, to these 3 dots, store as default parameters. I could select overall. I could select it just for outlines, for all object types, or what have you. So I am still a little fuzzy on whether overall and all object types are the same thing. So I would just click overall and then click apply, just so that it applies. And just to be sure, I would select this again, store as default, and select all object types. That means it's going to be set for all your fills, if you have a manual stitches for fills or anything, fills, outlines, anything. But I would select that as well and apply it, so I'm applying both of them, only because I'm still a little fuzzy between these 2 selections. So all object types and then hit apply. Then you're covered. Now we'll change the outline, this outline, into a manual stitch. We'll click done. So it's a single stitch now, and we'll convert outline to editable stitches. Actually, we didn't even have to click outline. Okay. We could just click it to editable stitches, because then that turns it into manual. Just so you know, you could do it this way just by clicking editable stitches, or you could do it in a two-step manner by clicking outline, outline to connection, but then if I did that, it's a connection. You'd have to select it, convert, connection, connection to manual. That's the same thing as editable. And now it's a manual stitch or an editable stitch. Whereas before, if I Control Z or hit this backspace or back, okay, I'm back to single stitch. If I just have it selected and do convert to editable stitches, it goes right to a manual. You still have this, but you can delete it then if you want. So then you have your basting box and you would move it to the top, and it has no tie off or anything on it. So that's all a preference on how you want your basting box tie-ups to be. So mine are now set for 0. So when I go into editor, there won't be any tie-off. Or you could have made your basting box in editor and you could have made it off of either this mesh box or off of that original single stitch box that you had. There's so many ways to do this. And then the other thing I would do is I would add a crosshair. So you can do that here or you can do that in editor. It's totally up to you. Again, in editor, if you add it, you just have to resize it because editor just lets you add a small crosshair, and I like them to be big as the design is. And if you add them in editor, there won't be any tie-ons. So it's totally up to you. If you have a design that you can merge in, that's a crosshair that you know is already set, you can do it now and then convert it to a manual. Actually, you're not going to be stitching the crosshair, so it doesn't even matter if you convert it to a manual or not. It's totally up to you. I have some crosshairs saved. I could just click merge to think where they're at. They're in Embroidery Designs, Tools, Crosshair. I have base stitches with crosshair or just a crosshair, 200 by 160, and open it. And then you would just resize it. And so of course you'd want to make it a different color than even your basting box, because this you're going to be stitching, this you're not. Let's grab it. Whoops. You want to select it first. So it's selected, and sometimes my pen sticks, so sometimes I have to click something else and then click this again and then drag it up, insert before. It's okay if you just leave it this color because it's so far away from the mesh. I'm just going to change the color. So with it selected, I'll click more and I'll just make it a bright green or maybe a little darker green so I can see it. And again, this doesn't matter if it's got tie-ons or tie-ups because it doesn't get stitched, but I do want it to be the same size as my mesh. So I'll click on my mesh. My mesh is 190 by 190. I look down at the bottom to see that. So I'll click on this and I'll go to Transform Transformation Window or Control-Alt-T, click on Size, keep this unchecked, 200, 190, enter, click 160, 90, enter, click Apply, and then Escape or this button here, and now it's the right size. And if you look down here in the items window, the vertical is going first, and you could see the red dot at the bottom. That means it's ending down at the bottom, so it's starting at the top. And I like it starting at the top because I know how I operate. But if you want it starting at the bottom, just either click it down here and go to edit and go to edge reverse nodes order. Now see, it's ending at the top, which means it's starting at the bottom. Sometimes people like it to start at the bottom because if they're working with a hoop that's not a hoop that came with the machine, if their machine automatically goes, whoops, to the back, sometimes they accidentally have their needle down and it hits the edge of the hoop or something. But I know what I'm doing, so I like mine to start at the top, so I'll just make it start at the top. And so that's your crosshair. So you would use this crosshair after you're hooped and when you're at the machine. So to actually hoop your item, you would have a crosshair either drawn on your quilt with chalk or a blue mark be gone. Or you could have a piece of tape on there, so many things. And you would actually take your grid and tape your grid, your hoop grid template that came with your hoop, and you would actually tape that grid onto your crosshair that's on your quilt top that's drawn in chalk. And so then you would be able to hoop according to that. Now I have homemade hoop templates that allow me to tape the hoop template on the fabric, and because I have the edges folded up on the template, and I have tons of videos on that, my center and rotate videos. But at any rate, and that'll be on YouTube. There's like a playlist for it. So you would go to my YouTube channel, WeQuilt Studio, and look on the playlist tab, and you'll see a lot of center and rotate videos where I tape the hoop template on the fabric, and then from there I either hoop or I float or what have you. If I'm just floating, then I can use the hoop template that comes with my machine. So, but that's a long video to watch. But at any rate, this crosshair is for after you've hooped and you're at your machine and you're going to check for center. So you're going to move your machine to get to center, and then you're going to fast forward through this crosshair with your machine buttons to make sure that you're not crooked. And so you fast forward through this crosshair, and you'll see it on my videos as well, how I do that. So this never really gets stitched. It's just something that you follow. So it helps you with centering, and then it helps you with whether or not you need to rotate the design slightly after you've hooped it, because we all hoop crooked. And so then once you've hooped and checked for everything, you would fast forward or whatever to the next thread color, which is your manual stitches. And you would stitch your basting box, and then you would stitch your design, not this, but you would stitch your design that we have in editor still. And then after the design, so then after all of your designs are stitched on your quilt top, then you would come back and pull up that same file and you would stitch your mesh. Now you can keep this object here in the file. Remember, this was the contour that we made from editor. You can keep it in the file so that when we do come to stitch our mesh, we'll have like this point here to line up to line our needle up to, and this point here, and you know, we have all these nice points to line up to. It's just another way to check that you're correct. And So you could follow this design just as you were following the crosshair. So you would want to turn this a different color so that, let's see, what colors do I have going? I'll just make it pink. So, we're not going to stitch it. It's just the outline that the already stitched design is taken, this outline is taken from the design that was stitched, if you recall. So it's kind of nice to have it. You don't have to use it. So when you go to stitch your mesh, you're going to have so many ways to center everything. You'll have your crosshair to center. You'll have a basting box that's already on, so you can match up this basting box with the one that's already down. You'll have this object, and then you could try and get the points of the mesh. You could try to get this point here, but if you didn't want to, fast forward to get to this point, you could actually make an outline of this. So that one outline that we deleted that had the arrowhead on it, you could have kept it and made it into a single stitch and then use that to line up this point to the design. So you could take your needle to this point as you're fast forwarding through it and see, well, is it in the right spot according to this design that's already on the fabric? And then you could go over to this one. It's just quicker. So again, there are so many ways to line up your design. If you've already deleted that one and you're like, oh, geez, I wish I would have kept it. Well, just click on the mesh, turn it back into a fill, but we don't want to lose the mesh. If we convert it to a fill, convert fill mesh to fill, we're going to lose the mesh. So Control C, Control V, and then select this one and convert that one to a fill, mesh to fill. So that one's a fill, and then convert fill mesh, create outline. You'll get two of them again. So delete that. We don't need the fill anymore. So you have this outline, and so you could follow this outline. You could make this outline, I don't know, a different color. I'm running out of colors. Say gray. Whoops, I didn't have it selected. Say gray. And so you could have this one to line up with. You could have this one to line up with, before you stitch your mesh. So I'll just leave it like this for now, and we'll just take everything into editor. So let's Control S. Let's make sure we have everything set. Make sure your stitch lengths are correct. I'm going to click on this and hit Control 1 to zoom out. A lot of times before I stitch my mesh, before I stitch the quilting, because with quilting, it's going to make your 6 tie-ons and 6 tie-offs. They're real small though. If you recall, my settings are set. If I hit on params, click overall and go to this tab, they're set for 0.7. 1.2 was the stitch length for tie-ups. That was Emberd's default. I made it smaller because I like the pattern it makes better. The 0.7 mils with the 6 ties. So in my stitch lengths of 2.2, they just make a nice pattern. So altogether, those 3 things make a nice pattern. But at any rate, you're going to have tie-ons and tie-offs. But if you're a picky quilter like me, you may want to bury long threads where they tie on and tie off. So you may want to create long jumps to your mesh, and then after your mesh. So in that case, you'd probably want to hit the manual stitch button, and you would just click manual. And then you don't really want to go outside of your design because you don't want to mess up the centering of it. So let's see, where is the mesh starting? Let me escape. So let me click it. I could see the red dot down here where it's ending. It's ending down here. But let me see where it's starting. So if I click on the mesh and I click edit, okay, I can see, and this is what's interesting about mesh. Something with a hole in it, I've noticed that it may look like it's ending up here, but it's really ending where the yellow circle is. You know, this, when you have a bar coming out either this way or this way or this way, depending on your stitch direction. My stitch direction is horizontal. That shows the ending. But what I've noticed is if you have a hole in your object, the real ending is where the yellow circle is. So just so you know. And it's showing as a start point there as well. If I hit the home button on my keyboard, that still stays red. If I click on this magnifier, oops, Control Z, click on the magnify, and then I got my white plus sign. So you can see there's a plus there. That means that's where it's starting, and then this kind of means where it's ending, but it really isn't. So it's starting over here. So if it's starting over there with it selected, let me hit Control 1. I probably want a jump to that area somewhere, you know, kind of far away from it. So since the design is already stitched, I could put my jump like in here where there's nothing stitched. I could put my manual stitch in here. So I'll click on manual. Let me click the magnifier and zoom in. You notice that the min is set for 0.5, but your maximum is 5.0, and you can make that larger or smaller. Just left click or right click to make it smaller. And if I made mine at, say, 4.0 as my max, then Embird's going to try and use the max before it uses the min. But just to be on the safe side, you could click on this and hold it down until it gets to 1.5, which is the minimum for a manual. And it's only going to use this if you're making a tight turn, and it has to use it. So I'm just going to click down here once, and then I'll maybe have it this long. That's about, if I scroll up, this one here, if I look to the right, my cursor is kind of like on there. If you look to the right, it's on 15. And then if I take this straight, that's at 30. So that's about 15. So say 16. So 16 divided by the max of 4 mils is 4 stitches. So I should have 4 stitches that are 4 mils each. That's what I should have. So just hit enter or the check. And remember, I'm in 3D, so to see my stitches, I have to hit generate. And you can kind of see the stitches here. Let me just click. You can see there's one. Let me zoom in. 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches, just like I said. And it does look like there's like a tie off there, even though I have my tie off set to 0. I'm pretty confident that when I get to editor, that's going to be 0 as far as tie-ups. And I'm going to go into SewSim now. Now, when I go into SewSim, for this object, I should probably put it in the proper position, the correct color and everything first. So I'm going to just hold my left mouse to get the hand, let go, insert before because I want it before the mesh and I want it the same color as the mesh, set identical color. Okay, and so now select the mesh and Control 1 to zoom out. Okay, so the mesh is generated. You know, I'm in 3D, so I think things have to be generated to see certain things, like even jumps. So now I'm going to just click on Show Jumps down here. Okay, so remember, not all of the jumps are going to show because some of my items or my objects are not generated, and I'm in 3D. If I went into normal, you'd see more jumps. But I'm in 3D, and I can see that, let me zoom in just a little bit. Okay, so there's my orange object there, and it's showing a jump from the previous object. It just does that. Even though they're different colors, it's going to show a jump. And the previous object is this gray one. It's this one down here. You just can't see the rest of this dotted line because this crosshair is in the way. Let's see. If I go to hide the crosshair, it's still not hiding because it's not generated, and I'm in 3D. There. Now the crosshair went away because I generated it. And you can see that from the gray up to this manual stitch, there's a jump. And yeah, it's a color change. Yeah, they show a jump. They just do, so that you could just kind of see, I guess, that there's a color change from this gray to this orange. So there's a jump there, and then you stitch the manual stitch, and then from the manual to the mesh, there's another jump, and this is where the mesh starts. And so we can go and check this in SewSim if we like. I could just select both of them, hold Control and select them both. And I can go to SewSim down here. Okay, let me just pause it. So I'm going to have the SewSim go real slow, like over here, one at a time, so that I can see the stitches. I'm also going to zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to have it pause on jump. That's what this means. I'll click that, and you can see it's green. I'm going to take this up here and go back to 0, so I'm on 0 of 8302, and now I'll click run. It's only going one at a time, and it's going to stop on the jump. So the first jump, it obviously didn't start on because I only selected this object and then the mesh. But it did stop there. And again, if I zoom in, you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches, and then this is the end. So in my mind, what I'm thinking they're doing in Studio Next is this green color is signifying the end. So it just looks like it's a tie, but it's not. And I'll verify this when I get to editor as well. So anyway, so it stopped for the tie, and now it's going to jump up to, let me zoom out a little. It's going to jump up to the mesh. So I hit run. And there it jumped up to the mesh. And see how it's starting up there with a real small little green up there as well. And now it's going to stitch one at a time. There. And it paused there for a while, probably because it was making its tie on. Let me go back. Let me hit run. Okay. And now it's stopped before it jumps. So I'll hit run, and it's going to jump, and there's the first stitch. And you don't really see anything. And then all of a sudden you see it going. And that's the thing, when you're in studio, you don't really see your your tie-ons being stitched, but you will see them in editor. So there the mesh is going to stitch. And so I can just speed it up and zoom out, just hold this. And there's your mesh. So remember, this is going to be on your quilt. It's going to be going through your batting and everything. It's going to stitch just two layers of stitches, exactly 2 layers, so it'll be perfect. And you're not going to really see it when it goes over itself again. Okay, so like right now, it's like you're wondering where it is. I did make a request for them to show us a plus, a plus sign where the cursor is stitching, just so we could see it. But right now it's going over itself. And you could see up here it's almost done, and now it's done. I'm not sure if that's just saying, it's done. I don't know what that is there for. So there it is. So I'll hit stop over here. And so we'd also want to make a manual stitch after the mesh so that we could bury that if we want. Granted, we don't have to do any of this. We could just cut them because 6 tie-ons and tie-offs is going to be strong enough, but I just like to bury mine and have a tie-ons and tie-offs. So let's make that last jump with our manual stitch. So click on the manual tool, and this time we know our mesh is ending down here. I can actually make my ending jump like way up here if I want, somewhere where that's not stitching. It really only has to be like 1 or 2 stitches, if that, because we just want it to jump over to it, and then that's it. It doesn't even need to make a stitch, but we have to make something. So I'll just click and click, and that's probably good enough. It's saying down here that it's 10.58 mils. So that's perfect. So it'll be like, 4 mils each or 4.5 mils. I could leave that at 5 now. It doesn't even matter. So I'll just hit enter, and I'll make it the same color, set identical color, and it's not generated, so I don't see the jump. Remember, we're in 3D, so I have to hit generate, and there now you see the jump. Now, if you recall, when we did the sew sim on the mesh, it did not stitch the outer square first or anything like that. It uses this edge, as for travel stitches. So, and it uses it as at least amount as possible, so not to create as much bulk. It does a lot of its traveling inside as well. So you may say to yourself, well, I would kind of like to have some sort of a permanent box stitched before I do the mesh, just to hold everything secure, kind of like a basting stitch, but not having long stitches. So we could go ahead and take this manual basting stitch box that we had created, but that kind of, I don't know, for me it's a pain, because when you go from, you have to copy paste it, then go from convert manual to connection, connection to manual, and when you do that while it was a connection, it kind of loops around and it's not as pretty. It requires more editing. So you could have, when this mesh was a fill, you could have kept that fill outer box, that outer outline of that we made for the fill. If you forget and you decide later that you want it, no problem. Just copy and paste the mesh, Control C, Control V. Now convert this one to a fill, convert, fill, whoops, convert, fill, create mesh to fill. Okay, now it's a fill, select it, convert, fill, create outlines, and we only want the box. And so now you have your outline, and we'll move it up into place. So we're gonna put it after the manual because we still want to jump to it. So we're going to put it before the mesh. Now remember, as I slide it up and insert before, since we created this box from this mesh, technically, this box starts and ends up here. Well, this mesh starts in the same spot, so there's no scissors, so we don't even have to worry about a connection or tie-offs or anything. There's only going to be the one tie on, and then it's going to stitch the mesh, and it'll tie off at the end of the mesh down here, just like it was before. So that's kind of nice. So let's get rid of this fill, though. We don't need it anymore. So now it's good. You still have your jump going from here over. Now, granted, it's not showing because we didn't generate the box. Remember, we're in 3D. So let's hit generate. And there now you see the jump. Shh, my dog is... She knows I'm almost done. I don't know how she knows, but she does. And then she gets excited because then I can give her some me time. So anyways, so there's your jump. So then you kind of want to keep all this in mind, you know, what you're keeping and what you're not. Remember, the pink is something that doesn't get stitched. This gray is something that really doesn't get stitched. You're only using it. Sometimes I like to make those some off color, just like the pink is an off color. So maybe I'll make this gray like a bright green. And this is not going to get stitched. I used to make my crosshairs red, but then they're red on my machine, so then I can't see it. And sometimes when I get into editor, if I make it the bright green, I can't see it that well, and people can't see it on my videos. So I'll just leave it dark green for now. It's hidden. And remember, this is the basting box that is going to get stitched. And then we stitch our design. So when we get back into editor, after this basting box is going to go the design. So we're going to fit it in between here, in between object 2 and 3 when we get over there. So let me hit Control S. And so now we're going to compile and put it into editor. Now, since I went back to editor while I had Studio open, it's probably not going to compile the first time. That's what happens when you go back and forth. So I'll show you what I mean. So I can hit this, or I can hit Design Compile, either one. And when I click it, so nothing happened. I just had to click on Editor and the icon to see, and you know, nothing compiled. Well, that's because I went back and forth, like I said. So, and remember, we're going to get rid of this blue and this black when we come back because we don't need them anymore. But I'm going to go and open up Studio Next again so that I can compile it again in the correct order. So Studio Next. Okay, and then I'll just do Design, Open, Resend, and it'll be the top one. Okay, and so I'll just go right ahead and hit compile. So now it came to, the regular screen. So I wanted to save it as a GIF, so I'll hit OK. And that's fine. The mesh, 4 needles. Okay, so now we have to do some arranging. So like I said, we're going to delete these two. So click this one, hold Control, select this one, hit the trash can, or delete. Sometimes delete works, sometimes you have to hit the trash can. And then this is our design. So remember, we said our design was going to come right after. Let me right click on this color and separate all colors so we could see everything. So this is what we saw in Studio Next. And so remember, we have our crosshair that's not going to stitch. Let me just make this a slightly brighter green just so we could see it. So our fabric's going to be hooped, our quilt top, and we're going to put our hoop in our machine, and then we're going to center the hoop according to the crosshair, the center of the crosshair, and then we're going to follow the crosshair. There's rotate buttons and so on, and you'll have to watch my center and rotate videos for all of that. And then once you know it's in the right spot, you'll want to go ahead and stitch your basting box. So this is with the manual stitches, and you'll want to check. Now it's showing a trim there, but we'll want to check this and make sure there's no ties, because these are the basting stitches we're going to take out. So it stitches your basting box, and then it's going to stitch your design. So we'll grab our design and slide it down, let go, insert after. So there it stitches our design. And then when it's done stitching the design, that's it. We're done. So you want to have your make sure that your machine stops after this green color. So you have stops on your machine that will tell it to stop before the pink. My machine, I'll have to put a red stop on the pink, because these here are for when we do the mesh. These are the ones that are going to help us line up and so on. The other thing is, you could technically take this cross here, copy and paste it, and bring it down here so that we have it again for when we stitch our mesh. And we could also bring the box. It could help us too, since our basting box is already stitched. We could bring them both down, but I'm just going to bring this one down. And you don't have to, because you could skip over these two colors, but I don't know, some people would rather see the crosshair again, because that's how they know when they're going to do their actual quilting. So I'll just select it and Control C, Control V, and then I'll slide it up, insert before. So then that'll show me where I'm going to start my mesh. So remember, after you've stitched this design, you have to do this to all the rest of your blocks, whether it's a butterfly or whatever other embroidery designs you have in your quilt. So you'll want to do these 3 steps here until your entire quilt top has all the designs on it. Then when you're ready to quilt in the hoop, then you'll bring the file back and then fast forward to this crosshair. Or you could just line it up using this crosshair And then fast forward to the object that's after this one, which would be your pink. And remember, you're not going to stitch the pink, you're just going to use your needle to further verify the points of the pink and see if your needle is lined up with these points of the pink. You can also come and verify these points here on the green. That's where your mesh is actually going to be, and see if those, when you bring your needle, when you fast forward to this point and you see your needle is going to be right, here, you could see it because it'll travel and then it'll change direction. So then you'll know this is the point that you want to compare to this point that's already stitched. So you can use either one of these to help you line up. And I probably shouldn't have used so many colors that were close to each other. Like I could have made the butterfly a different color, like, because I thought I already had blue in here. If that were blue, and then these two colors here, the pinks and the greens, are colors that are going to help us. But then this is green too, so I'm really sorry. I should have used different colors. We'll just use that. So now you can see the greens are the crosshairs. This basting box, I should probably make it the same color as the first color of the design. That way it'll just jump right over to it. So I'm going to just grab this, hover, let go, set identical color. So now it'll just jump over and you'll just let it do its tie on and everything. And it'll make a nice clean tie on because it jumped over from this box. So that's nice. So you have your cross here to line up everything. You stitch your basting box, you stitch your design, and then after all your designs are stitched on your entire quilt top, you'll come back and do the mesh. And again, you can line this up with either a template that you have taped on or a crosshair that was drawn on from before. It might be gone by now, it may not. But at least you have your crosshair here. And a lot of people do like to tape their template on. So you could use a template, a paper printed template, and just tape it on and use the crosshair from there. And then again, you have these two designs to help you line things up. And then your mesh, you'll have, if I click on the items window down here, the 11 stitches are showing here in red. It's kind of hard to see that they're selected. Let me zoom in. Let me select another one. Okay, that's this. And let me select this again. Okay, there. So those are basically your little manual stitches that we made. And then they're going to jump to this. Let me zoom out. Let me zoom to select it up here. So these little manual stitches here, again, they're right here. They're going to jump to this entire box and mesh. If you recall, the box stitches before the mesh. So everything here is the boxed outline that we created, and it's the mesh. So, and then after that, after all the mesh stitches, it is going to jump. It's going to tie off and jump to these little stitches up here. So we're going to have a long thread to bury. Now when it makes its first jump up here from this manual to over here, and you let it start stitching, you have to then stop the machine to get this long thread out of the way. So here's what you want to do. After this stitches and then jumps to start the outline of the mesh, you'll let it do its tie on and then let it start the outline. And then after it's stitched the outline for, you know, so many stitches, maybe up to here, you'll want to stop your machine and you'll want to pull this top thread loose, and then over here take your thread and pull on it so that you can then get the bobbin thread up as well, and then tape both of those long threads to the side of your hoop. So that's just if you're OCD like me and want to bury your threads. And like I said, if you don't care about burying, you're just going to let it do its tie off and trim, then you didn't even need these manual stitches and this jump and so on. So then that's it. So then you'd let it stitch the outline and stitch the mesh, and then after it stitches the mesh, it ties off down here and it jumps over to this couple of stitches here so that you have another long thread to bury. So now before we do a sew sim, I do want to check those manual stitches that look like they still are tying off. So I'll start with this one up here. Remember, this was our basting box. And I'm going to actually hide the mesh. So I'm going to click on the color to hide it. And so I want to be in stitches mode here down at the bottom. So I'm going to click on that. And I know it's starting and ending up here. Well, the basting box is starting and ending up here. So I want to zoom in up there first. So I'm going to click this zoom icon and zoom in somewhat close. That should be good enough. And now I want to use the points editing mode button. So I'm going to just click on this basting box first, and I'm going to make sure that the items window is selected down here, because it just makes the points editing mode easier when you select the item in the items window first and then select the points editing mode. So it selects all of the nodes, but if you just click on, you know, one, you could see here's these tie-offs that I suspect. So I'm going to click above those because I know my design is going up and to the right. So I want to just see what the starting nodes are like. So I'll click there. And you can see up in the box, it says 1 to 2. And I'm going to use my arrow buttons on my keyboard to go, you know, up or down. So the right mouse arrow key will take me upwards going forward, and the left arrow key will take me down. So when I go down, you can see up at the top I'm at 2 to 3, 1 to 2. I'll hit it again, 1 to 1. So that's my first stitch. And so it's at 1 to 1. And then when I hit the right arrow key, you would line up the template by sticking a pin through the point of the butterfly, both on the paper template and the fabric, and so on. Okay, so the beginning is good. There's no tie-ons at the beginning. Now I'm going to click down here. And incidentally, if you click like on the outside, sometimes that throws off your arrow button and you can't use it anymore, and then the screen jumps around and takes you to a different object or something. So just be aware of that. So anyway, so I'll click before. so that I could gear myself up towards the ending. So you could see I'm on 189 to 190. And now I'll hit the right arrow key. It used to be in the older versions, it was the tab button, I believe. Now it's the arrow key. Okay, so 192. And now I went backwards. But just very slight. That's my tie off, my 0.0 or my 0.7 mil tie off. That's not supposed to be here because my manuals were set for 0. So I'm going to write to Embird about that because that shouldn't be. Either I did something wrong over in Studio Next, or it's just a glitch in the program because, you know, the Studio Next is still in beta. I didn't check to see if this was happening in regular Studio. I should probably check that as well. But you do want to check your manual stitches. I would just always check them until you know for sure that everything is correct. So I'm going to have to delete that, but let's just see. So that was 1. I'll keep going forward. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I'm back to 1 to 1. So you could see I have 6 tie-offs after this manual basting stitch. So let's hit the other arrow key and go back. Okay, I'm going to go forward. Okay, right there I'm going to hit my delete. And I'm just clicking it again, 198. It's too bad that I have to hit delete after this one and then I lose my place. So I'm on 194, I'll hit delete. And I could see that that still needs to be deleted. So I'm just going to hit delete since these are just basting stitches. I'm just going to keep deleting. Okay, there. So now I'm on 190 to 191, and I'm going to go forward. I'm on 94 to 94. So that's the ending. And it's back at stitch 1. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So I'm going to have to check these other manual stitches as well. Now, the next manual stitch is going to be before and after the mesh down here. So I'm going to have to click down here, bring the mesh back, and I'm going to have to, I don't have to separate them, but it might make it easier for me to see them. Let's see. If I grab my magnifier and zoom in, to be honest, I could just lasso these and delete them. There's so many ways that you can do this. Here's your lasso tool right here. And I could just come over here and click, click, and then double click to close it. So I've got stitches 6 through 11 selected. And I could separate them with the separate button. And here they are separated, and I could just delete them. Hit my delete button, or the trash can. You can hit your trash can if the delete button doesn't work. And so now there's only 5 stitches here. So let's just see. Let's go to, let's click on the 5 and then click points editing mode. And I'll just click on, say, this one. This is, it's saying 1 to 2. That doesn't make sense. Okay, so I'll just click on this one and I'll hit the right arrow button. 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6. I'll hit it again, and I jumped. So that's good. That's what I wanted. And then at the end of it, this one here, well, that one is up here. So on this one, I'll just, with it selected down here in the items window, I'll hit the points editing mode. Oh yeah, it does look like it has one. So I'll click here, and it's the high number, of course, because it's connected to the, it's in the same object as the mesh was. So I'll just hit my arrow button. Okay. So I'll keep going. You can see it's going back and forth. So I'll just click here and arrow over, and I'll just keep hitting delete. I'm hitting delete as I'm selecting, and that's my last one, because that's all I need for the ending. And so then I'll hit save. Okay, I'll just hit enter as those come up. So I'll click on this, I'll hit zoom to selected. It's zooming to this stitch here. You know, maybe click that and then click zoom to selected, because I couldn't click outside because I was so zoomed in. So that's why I just, when I clicked on this, I just clicked here, and I'm zooming to this, which is the mesh, and then I clicked that. So there's so many ways I could have zoomed out. I could have clicked 1-to-1 up here. I could have clicked this zoom out button. I could have clicked this one and then right clicked to zoom out. So there's so many ways to do it. So now we'll do a sew sim. And one thing to note about the sew sims, if you want the sew sim to stop between color changes, you have to group all of your objects, because if you click on, say, any object, well, after the object here in the items window, you don't see the word stop for color stop. Well, that's because they're not all grouped. You're just, you're only clicking on this object, and same thing with any of them. You don't see the word stop anywhere, even here where I have a lot of different items in the items window. So you'll just want to do Control A and then join them all up here. Now when you look down in the items window, you see your stops. You see a stop there, there. You see all your stops. So that's just if when you do your sew sim, if you want to have it stop on a color change. And I do, just for the purposes of this video. The other thing you want to think about before you do your sew sim is whether or not you want your jumps to show on the sew sim. So to get them to show up on the sew sim, you have to go into Manager. So that's this up here. And then click Options up at the top. Show floating stitches or jumps. So now they're going to show here in Manager, and then in Editor, they'll show up here as well. So, and that's just if you want them to show in the sew sim. So I'll show you what I mean. So if we go to sew sim, we can either go to sew sim by right-clicking on the object, sew sim, or we can use the icon over here, sew sim icon. Click that, and I'll just click pause for a moment, and I'm going to take this cursor and bring it all the way back so that we're at the very beginning. And I'm going to have the sew sim halt on the floating stitches, so I'm going to click this button here, and also have it stop on a color change. And see, if you clicked this and didn't have your objects all grouped in editor, this wouldn't even work. And then over here is show floating and jump. Now here you can choose to show it or not in the sew sim. So if I click that, you notice all the jumps went away. Even though we haven't even started, you could still kind of see them. But if I click them, you know, now you can kind of see them. And there's other things that you can show, the hoop, and you could show the fabric in 3D. Now I have it showing in 3D, and maybe it'd be better if I didn't. It'd be easier to see things. And this is if you want to split your actual design. A lot of people use Sew Sim to split. Okay, and there's your hoop size and your zoom to fit. So I'll just click zoom to fit. And we're going to start out not maybe at 500, maybe like 250. It's going to be halting on floating and so on, so we don't need it to go too slow, but I'll speed it up as we get farther into it. So I'll go ahead and hit play. We're on stitch 1 of 21,657 stitches, and so all the colors are showing up at the top because we have everything grouped. So that's another benefit of grouping everything or joining everything when we were in editor there. So I'll hit play, and right away it stopped. It stitched the first part of the crosshair because there is a jump to the next part of the crosshair, so I'll just keep hitting play every time it stops. And there it jumped and it stitched the second part of the crosshair. So now I'll hit play, and it's going to stitch this box, and you're still going to see a jump coming from the green to the blue. Even though they're a different color, it still shows them as jumps. So there it jumped over, and it's stitching this basting box. These are the manual stitches. And then it stops there because now it's going to jump to the design. Okay, so it jumped here and it's stitching this part of the design. Okay, so you can see it stopped. You can see the stitches stopped here, and there's these notches here also that show you where there's like a jump or a color change or what have you. And so after it's stitched this part, it's going to jump to another part of the design. So we'll hit play. So it jumped from here all the way up here. So I guess that's okay. For me, I would have probably not made it a jump. I would have made it stitch, but I would have made a connection stitch from here to this part of the design, but I'm just kind of using this design as an example. So it's going to stitch all of the blue, so we can speed it up now. Okay, and so now the blue butterfly is done. It stopped on the color change. So we'll hit play. So it stitched the outline, so it stopped on another color change. So the design is done. So now I would basically stitch my designs on all the rest of my quilt top. And then when I'm ready to do the mesh in the hoop quilting, I'll pull this design back up again, and I'll center it and everything with the crosshair. And I could use the crosshair here at the beginning of the design, or the one that I put, you know, in the middle of the design, which signifies the beginning of our mesh. So that's what's going to stitch now, is the crosshair again. So I'll hit play. And then after the crosshair is, it's going to stitch the pink outline, but we're not going to let it stitch, and you have to remember to make sure you have a color stop on this pink at your machine, because that's just going to help us for lining up. Take our needle to this point and this point and make sure our needle is lining up with those points. If not, we have to jog our machine. And remember, we still have to use the crosshair too, because we do want to use the crosshair to check for rotation. So you could use the crosshair to get it centered and then check for rotation and then line up your pink. You could do it that way. So that's usually the way I do it. I line up the crosshair no matter what, and then I fine tune it with the next objects, for instance, the pink. And so then we'll just play through the pink, and the pink, of course, there was a jump from the end of this crosshair to the pink. And you could see the pink is starting right here, so that's kind of beneficial for us because that's one of the points that we wanted to use to help us line up our design for when we do our mesh. And then again, you can do the same thing with the with this outer one here. So I'll click play, and the outer one is green, and we could use that outer one as well to line up our needle with, how it is in relation to this point here and this point here and so on. If not, you could just fast forward through them and be done with it. And then the next object is the stitch that's going to go all the way around. Now remember, and then it's going to be attached to the mesh. This next stitch is our permanent outlining stitch that is kind of like our holding stitch again. It's like the basting stitch, but it's got short stitches. And you can even use that box to line up your points here if you just want to do it that way. But I kind of like the idea of using the points around the design because for me it's more exact. Because fabric can stretch and everything when you get out this far. But just know that it's there if you need it. So also remember, before you start stitching this, you really do need to take out your basting stitches. So that were in here, because you don't want to stitch over them. So when you come to this point in the design or the sew sim, when you stitch this rectangle, there's not going to be stitches here anymore. You might see the hole punctures, maybe not, after you've handled your quilt so much. Or you could just take out your basting stitches as you go. That way maybe you can see your stitch penetration points. So anyway, so that it's going to stitch this permanent box around. So I'll hit play. So it stitched it real fast. I'm on 1,000 because remember, let me hit pause. It's stitching this and then it's right away going to start into the mesh. There's not going to be a tie off or anything. There'll be a tie on for the box and there'll be a tie off for the mesh, but in between the box and the mesh, it's just, there's no tie on or tie off. It just, the box ends here and the mesh starts here. So that's nice. It's seamless and there's not a lot of bulk there. So then it stitches your mesh. It's stitching over twice. And then it's stopped because it's going to jump now. It stopped here. It's going to make this long jump to these last little manual stitches. that we can, so we can bury this long thread. So I'll hit play, and it jumped, and here's the 2 stitches. It seems like when I was hitting play, I wasn't hitting it in the right spot. So you have to hit it like right in the center, I guess. So there you go. There's your sew sim. And close that. And back to the design. And you can hit Control 2 to zoom out if you like. That's another shortcut. And our jumps are showing here, and you may or may not like that. If you don't want them to show, of course, you have to go back into Manager and say Options, Show, show floating, and then go back into Editor. So it only takes a second, but just so you know, that's what you have to do. So I'll just hit Control 2. So there you have it. There's your beautiful quilt in a hoop design. I hope this was helpful, and be sure to check out all my other videos, and maybe you would want to become a member of my Buy Me a Coffee group, where you can become a member and get 4 free videos every month for just $10. So they're not technically free, but they're a lot cheaper than buying each video individually. All right, then. We'll see you next time. Bye.